We are going to learn a few things about an affordable zoom lens that can be quite handy for wildlife photography, for capturing parts of the city from above, and why not, it's even good for street photography. I had a lot of fun using it. Since I was a teenager, I wanted something like this. It's the Sigma 100 to 400mm f5 to 6.3 DGOS HSM. We are going to learn 15 things about it. Let's start with the first one. What's on the lens? This is the version compatible with Canon DSLRs. We have the big zoom ring that is a bit stiff but turns quite smoothly. The lock switch that on the Canon DSLR version can be used only at 100mm. The focusing ring turns smoothly and it's precise. On the left side we have two switches that are for focusing. The third switch has two modes for optical image stabilization and the fourth one is for custom functions. On the back we have a metal mount. Good news! It has a weather sealing gasket. I tested it. No problems after spending 2 hours in harsh weather. Let's now move to the second thing, size and weight. Retracted, the lens is 18 centimeters long, and if we zoom in all the way, it is 24 centimeters long. It is smaller than other 100 to 400mm lenses that can be found on the market. It's also lighter, has roughly 1180 grams. Third thing, focal length. Here I'm gonna show you some photo samples. Having the luxury to zoom in until you reach 400mm means that you can be very selective with your compositions. You can exclude a lot of things from the frame and include only what matters. With a big zoom, you can capture more things faster. As you now see the photos on the screen, you can probably tell that I had a lot of fun using this lens. If you don't mind carrying it, it's an interesting choice for street photography. It's also a good starter lens for wildlife photography. Another interesting thing to mention here is that 400mm on a full-frame camera will be 640mm on a crop sensor camera. Let's move to the fourth aspect, compatibilities. The lens will work on both full-frame and APS-C DSLRs from Canon. Of course, with an adapter, it will work on mirrorless cameras as well. Multiple versions of this lens were created, compatible with the mounts that you now see on the screen. Fifth, maximum and minimum aperture values. The maximum aperture value is f22 at 100mm and f29 at 400mm. The lens has a rounded 9-blade aperture, which delivers good bokeh as we will see later in tests. The minimum aperture values are now on the screen. f5 stays f5 until we reach 111mm. f5.6 stays open until we reach 233mm, and f6.3 comes after that. Number 6. Focusing. Although it sometimes has the tendency to focus hunt, when it locks onto the target, the focus is precise and we have a sharp subject. This is the noise of the focusing motor using the built-in camera microphones. With an external microphone, it will be even better. Of course, when the camera isn't recording video, the lens focuses a bit faster. Another thing to mention here, the minimum focusing distance is at 1.6 meters. Number 7. Image stabilization. Here we have the image stabilization turned off, and now we turn it on in mode 1. It's definitely not the best image stabilization out there, but it does its job, especially if we are not zoomed in all the way to 400mm. Stabilization mode 2 is a bit worse. It's better not to use this one. Number 8. Full-time manual focus override. That manual focusing ring that turns smoothly always remains active, even if the lens is set to autofocus. That's because the lens has full-time manual focus override, and in some situations this will come in handy. Number 9. Let's see the coating. The lens has Sigma's super layer coating that minimizes ghosting and flaring. It also helps by keeping a good contrast in bright light. Well, we'll see how effective this coating is in one of the upcoming tests. Number 10. Release date and lens class. This lens was released back in 2017. It's a recently released product, so we wanted to bring a good image quality. It belongs to Sigma's contemporary lens lineup, an affordable class of lenses. Let's see how it performs. Let's see the sharpness. On a full-frame camera at 100mm f5, the middle of the image is very sharp. Contrast is also looking good. In the corner though, the situation changes. Not too sharp at f5, but it's looking much better now at f8. I know that this lens is a good performer when it comes to sharpness. Maybe my copy of the lens had an issue at 100mm in the corners. Let's continue by zooming halfway at 250mm. Here, the minimum aperture is f6.3. Again, the middle of the image has good sharpness, no issues. The corner has improved a lot. A bit of softness, but it's decently sharp. An improvement comes now if we close down to f8. At 400mm, the middle of the image got a bit softer, but it still looks decent. In the corner, we have more softness. We also see some magenta color fringing, but again, we can stop at f8 for a better result. On a crop sensor camera at 100mm, the middle of the image has good sharpness. Also, the corner is looking good. It's a bit better if we close down at f6.3. At 250mm, the middle of the image is still sharp. It lost a bit of contrast, but that's barely noticeable. The corner is just slightly softer, but has a decent amount of sharpness. Now at f8, it got better. Finally, at 400mm, the middle of the image got a bit softer. The same thing happened in the corners, where again we see some magenta color fringing. We get a better result by closing the aperture at f8. So we have a good result here. Nice sharpness in the middle and in the corner of the image. Just a bit of color fringing that appears only at 400mm. Let's see distortion and vignetting. At 100mm, we have a tiny amount of pincushion distortion, and vignetting is not too bad at f5. By closing now to f8, the dark corners are pushed away. At 400mm, pincushion distortion is more pronounced, but it's not too bad. Vignetting is kept under control, and if we stop down to f8, it looks good. Moving to bright light performance. We see some flaring, but contrast is nicely kept under control. It's quite a good result for a lens that has a lot of glass in it. Moving to close-up image quality. It has a good performance in close-ups. We do see just a tiny amount of color fringing on the contrasting edges, but we have nice sharpness and good contrast. It stays this way until we reach f11, where the effects of diffraction starts to soften this image a bit. Of course, more softness appears if we close the aperture more, but overall a pleasing result for close-ups. Finally, bokeh. The rounded 9-blade aperture is doing a great job. The backgrounds are nice and soft. Even on a crop sensor camera, if we get close and zoom in a bit, the objects in the background completely disappear. An excellent result on bokeh. Overall, this lens comes recommended. Good sharpness, low image distortion, and great bokeh. If this video was useful, please press that like button. See you on the next one.